I'm Dana Connors, President and CEO of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. At our annual dinner last year, we were honored to present a video tribute to a Maine icon, the late Woodrow Cross of Crossan Shores. This year, we are honored to pay tribute to Harold Alfond in our most recent One Voice Maine magazine for all he has done and his foundation continues to do for our state. There is another person we want to honor this year, a person whose impact has also been deeply important to Maine. That person is David Flanagan, whose service to our state spans decades. David was the eldest of 8 siblings, born and raised in Maine. He attended school in Bangor, Hamden, and Portland, and later graduating from Harvard University and Boston College Law School. David credits his parents with passing on a resilience and sense of determination. Their example helped shape David into the leader he became. From his early work in state government to later becoming a turnaround specialist, the go-to persons whose leadership was sought after in difficult times by organizations including Central Maine Power, the University of Southern Maine, and even the U.S. Senate. Also notable was David's service on numerous boards, from Maine General Health to the Harold Alfond Foundation, and many, many more. To the remarkable work he and his wife Kay have contributed to the Children's Center for Kids with Special Needs. In late August, David shared with the public that he was battling pancreatic cancer. Sadly, he lost that battle. Before he passed away, it was a great privilege to sit down with David and Kay in September at their home in Manchester. It was also a privilege to speak with several people who knew David well, who shared with us David's impact on them professionally and personally, and his lasting impact on Maine. Those people include senators, governors, and other prominent Maine leaders. Leaders who describe David as genuine, modest, selfless, a man of great character, intellect, integrity, and respect for others. Driven by a commitment to Maine and what is right for Maine people, a true servant leader. Now, in their own words about David Flanagan, the friend, the mentor, and the leader.
David is one of those individuals who feels called to serve.
When trouble calls and there's a hard job to do, go to David Flanagan. He always answers the bell.
He would dig deep into things and find out the root causes of a problem.
And then turn that analysis into positive strategic action.
David is strong, he's effective, he's analytical, and he knows how to build a team.
You know, he wasn't threatened by bringing in people that knew more than he did about the subject matter. Yeah, and he listened to them.
And then he'll ask his questions and he'll come to his conclusion. And it's usually a very rational business compromise.
He's first and foremost very analytical. He may have a big picture in mind, but it's not going to be because he made assumptions or you did it based on emotion. It's because he did the math.
He is truly, I think, the most consequential person that I've ever met. He gets engaged in these issues and ideas and what have you, but he also follows it through to outcomes that can be actually implemented and carry us forward.
He does things with intensity.
He's determined.
Almost compulsive in his own need to do productive work.
He really gets into it and gives it his all and a lot of time.
No matter how complex the problem, no matter how long it may take.
He was always quietly impressive. He didn't, take over the room. He wasn't loud and boisterous.
He had a really deep commitment to helping the little guy.
He also has this wry sense of humor.
I mean, he is just a delight.
You could count on David in a board meeting to break a tense moment by saying something really self-deprecating and funny.
Never takes himself too seriously.
He's a really interesting person. He's really curious.
He has a great mind. It's facile, it's curious, great capacity to synthesize information, get to the root of it.
And dedication to understanding the facts made for a wonderful contributor to so many organizations and causes.
For his early career, he was sort of Joe Brennan's sidekick.
And I think he actually established a lot of his reputation and his stature during that period.
I always had a tremendous amount of respect for David because of his educational background, but the way he conducted himself too. And I thought he had a lot to do with the way that made Governor Brennan such a good governor of the state.
Governor Brennan depended on him greatly, not just for legal advice and political counsel, but for wise counsel generally.
When I was in the state senate for 2 years, I'd be driving, he'd be writing speeches, trying to make me look a lot better than I was, which wasn't hard to do for David.
When Governor Brennan first ran for governor, we all worked on his first inaugural speech. I found a draft of that, maybe 2 drafts of it, which I gave to the Brennan archives. It had John O'Leary's original draft, and it had Arthur Stilfon's scribblings and David Flanagan's methodical changes here. And I just remember us working on that as a team and what he contributed to that.
If David came, he was working, researching something or other. He was a star, and he just worked and worked at it. He wasn't very political in one sense.
He was a Democrat, but he was really an independent Democrat.
Someone that you knew was leading you in the right direction.
He's a really smart guy.
He was just so thoughtful and so analytical and so conceptual.
Behind that was a steely person, and he always would make the hard decisions.
He made decisions. You know, he was a tough guy.
Not really being afraid of what people would say or how they would react when he knew it was the right thing.
He started out as the lawyer for CMP, working with John Rowe, and moved into the leadership just because of his obvious qualities, and it was a tough job.
We were dealing with some incredible regulatory, legal, and financial challenges.
I recognize, as anyone would, how serious the problems were for CMP. And my attitude was, okay, how do you deal with this? Come up with the best team you can. Come up with policies you think will correct the fundamental problems, and plow ahead with it, even though there's risk.
He really undertook a decade-long transformation that put us on a solid footing, to have a strong electric grid, one with a lot of renewable resources. And it required some tough decisions. You know, it required an early shutdown of Maine Yankee. It required selling our generation assets. So some really hard decisions that had to be made, but they were the right decisions.
And he was very, very determined to improve the customer perception of whether CMP was doing a good job, and he did.
When he was heading up CMP, they had the highest rating in the country for a utility his size.
You know, what he did to really put CMP on strong footing was remarkable.
When the ice storm came along, I think it would have probably been the straw that broke many camels' backs, but David rose to the occasion.
Being head of the major utility when 500,000 or 600,000 people don't have power, there's no place to hide from that responsibility, and David didn't.
Barely slept during that period and was the voice of steadiness and optimism.
David just exuded, you know, we're going to get through this. You know, this is a problem. We're going to work it out.
He took charge of this crisis, organized everyone, and most important of all, communicated constantly.
He was calm, and that's important because in a crisis, people need calm. They don't want a leader who looks worried.
I've always seen a deep thoughtfulness in how he responds to crises and how he responds to problems at all levels.
During the ice storm, we were in constant contact.
I joke that I was a VP of CMP and he was vice governor.
And I had some situation where I was having a problem with the National Guard. So I called him up.
And my phone rings, and I look down and it's Flanagan. You know, this is in the middle of the ice storm.
You know, I said, God damn it, Angus, you know, I thought we were cooperating on this deal. And he was live on Channel 6.
I said, I'm sorry, I got to take this call. So on the air, I'm talking to Flanagan because that was the back and forth. You know, what do you need? What can we do to help?
He was everywhere, getting the resources we needed from neighboring utilities, the federal government, working with other businesses.
And then sort of a funny story at the end of the experience. You remember Al Gore came. And Al Gore came because he was vice president. He was going to tell us we were getting FEMA money. And as he was leaving that day, he turned to me just as he left. He said, Angus, let me know if there's anything you need. The next morning at about 6 o'clock, I get a call from Flanagan, and he said, we're just flat out of bucket trucks. David said, we've found bucket trucks and line workers in North Carolina, but the trouble is they can only go 50 miles an hour. It'll take them like 3 days to get up here. Can you help us? Well, I said, Al Gore said, what do you need? So I called him that morning and said, we need air transport for bucket trucks. And they came into the Brunswick Naval Air Station. I'll never forget, it was like the cavalry arriving. And these planes would come in and the nose would open up and out would come these bucket trucks from North Carolina with these guys driving. But it was all Flanagan, you know, Gore saying, what do you need? Flanagan saying, we need bucket trucks, and lo and behold, we flew them in, and it was an amazing experience. But David was so steady and bing, 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 you know, this is what we got to do. It was a logistics and mechanical challenge as much as anything else, and then the leadership of his team at CMP.
Due to his organizational and communication leadership skills, we got through it.
Leadership matters, and David Flanagan was the right guy in the right place at the right time, and really, I believe, saved lives.
I personally think it was a springboard to many other things for him. In life, we can have many skills. We also have to have opportunity, and that gave him an opportunity to show who he was and what he could do.
David really couldn't turn away from a challenge.
The only flaw that I know that David has is complete and absolute inability to say no when trouble calls.
He answered the call. Don't forget, he picked up and went to Washington to do that incredibly important job for Susan.
When Hurricane Katrina hit, an absolutely devastating storm, it revealed the weaknesses in the federal government's ability to do emergency response. And I couldn't help but contrast the response of the federal government and Louisiana and Mississippi to what we had gone through in the ice storm of 1998. And I thought instantly of David. Now at that point, he had retired. And so I called him up and asked him if he would be willing to come out of retirement, relocate to Washington, and I didn't know how long the investigation would take.
So that was a dramatic, unexpected moment in my dubious life. I said I had to talk to Kay about it, but how do you turn down a major federal responsibility for something like that.
He was great fun to be with, even though investigations like this involve very long hours, a lot of work, a certain amount of tension. David kept his upbeat personality, that wonderful, wicked sense of humor, and he knew everybody who came down from Maine. So it didn't matter what the group was or who the people were, it seemed like he knew everyone. And so he often went out to dinner with them or had lunch and caught up, so that he kept a foot in Maine at all times while he was doing his work in Washington. When you look at our Katrina report, it is 727 pages long. He looked at everything, at every aspect, and that characterized his work, whether it was at the University of Southern Maine or looking system-wide for savings, or at CMP when he's twice been brought in to do turnarounds. He examines everything to find what is the key to turning this around.
And you know, people say that every organization reflects the person at the top, and I think that that's what has happened with David's service as a leader.
People called on him for a reason.
He is a go-to guy.
I don't think he's ever lobbied for a job. I mean,
I think it was like 911. We got a problem. Can you come and help us? And he did it well.
With respect to preservation management, that's a low-profile company, but it's nationwide, and it's owned in part by Joe Wishcamper.
I called David. He was just coming off of the Katrina assignment that he received from Senator Collins. And I said, David, would you consider maybe taking over as the CEO of this company? And he agreed to do it. And he was there for 3 years. And then he consulted with us for an additional year. And he basically turned the entire morale situation around at the company and made all of these gains that put that company on a footing for the future.
That was a great experience for me because they had a lot of successful operations, but they needed to be pulled together. Trying to create a management structure that would work was my major responsibility.
David Flanagan was the essential Maine guy.
He had a unique and very deep understanding of the Maine people.
it's so clear that he has cared about the people of the state and the institutions of the state his whole adult life.
He could have gone anywhere. He could have made $1 gazillion.
He undoubtedly had a number of opportunities to go work somewhere else, have a bigger power base, earn a lot more money. He didn't choose to do that.
Maine is such an easy place to live in terms of travel and meeting people and accountability and no anonymity. Those are all great qualities that I thought were as good or better here than anywhere else. That's how I ended up here.
He grew up here, all his roots and connections were here, and he understood the relationships with communities, with the governor, with, you know, the various people that he had to work with. And I think, you know, I think that's important. I think that's one of the reasons he was successful.
What's the secret sauce for David's leadership and success? I think a lot of it took place in that home when he was growing up and in those parents.
I think at home they were interested in education. They were interested in maximizing the potential of the school that they were attending, and they did.
Well, I've been very fortunate in having the kind of mentors I had. I sometimes say that my parents were some of the greatest people from the greatest generation, and they sacrificed their own careers for the benefit of their kids. I was talking with somebody the other day who said that he never saw an event that I was at getting honored or something, that my father wasn't there. You know, they just put their time and effort into us.
I thought that whatever he wanted to do, he'd be good at. And if I thought he wouldn't be good at it, I would have said, I don't think so. But I didn't have to do that. He's the kind of person who, if you give him an opportunity and he thinks he can make a difference in it, and it is for something he really believes in, he will take it. He will not turn it down. He just went back to CMP a year and a half ago, or whatever it is. He did that because his heart is committed to the state of Maine, the people of Maine, the company he served before, and doing the right thing. And he will be like that as long as he lives. That's the kind of person he is.
You know, when we hit a rough spot, his generosity to come back to really reinstall and reassert a sense of Maine leadership and presence for the company at a time when, you know, he didn't need to, is remarkable. And, you know, it's bearing, you know, the fruits that we expected. Having met all the customer service standards, really the highest standards in the country that were set for us almost 2 years ago.
No company in Maine has a more dedicated workforce, more capable than CMP had then or now. We had a lot of assets working for us, and we were able to sort of gang them up in a way that was successful.
He cares about the company, he cares about the people that are doing there, and he knows that he has a role to play and he wants to play it. He doesn't want to sit back, even during this very difficult time in his life, in his family's life. He doesn't want to leave the helm, and I just think that's a type of person that he is. And that's why people love him so much.
When he took on a similar challenge at USM, he didn't do that because he knew that it would be a fun job. He did it because he really cared about preserving an institution that was in big trouble.
We had a need. We knew we needed an interim president. We knew we needed to do a search, but that in the meantime, we had a very difficult turnaround situation at USM.
I recommended to the chancellor at that time, Chancellor Page, that we ought to seek out David Flanagan.
And my immediate reaction was, go get him. We don't need to talk anymore about this.
Well, the chancellor and the governor put him in charge of digging deep and finding some solutions there too, and he went to work and did it. Ruffled a lot of feathers, but you know what? He got the job done.
And it was one great example of David. He takes things on that no one wants to do. And he did a good job. He was not popular in doing the job, but he did a good job. And the net result was that the next president, Glenn Cummings, has been able to grow the organization from the base that David built.
There have been a lot of changes since I left, but I think that was a fundamental turning point and very important, because getting the University of Southern Maine back on the right track and, you know, living within its means and being realistic, having an accessible, affordable, higher education is just a cornerstone of any policy for success.
The biggest impact is going to be the legacy of what he has taught others like me and people, you know, many people in many walks of life.
He taught me to take a more comprehensive approach and to not set an arbitrary deadline for finishing an investigation, but to keep at it until it was done.
He's given me some additional courage to try to push things through.
And how to be part of a solution rather than trying to dictate a solution.
But also a model. I mean, when you think about how to act as a lawyer, as a colleague, as a leader, you know, he set the example.
It's his ability to look to the future and to make sure that the changes, the improvements are going to be lasting. That is his legacy.
And that legacy is, I think, currently impacting every single citizen in this state, and it'll continue to impact our children and our grandchildren for decades to come.
His impact on his beloved home state of Maine has been nothing short of extraordinary.
He didn't just take charge of one thing permanently. He went here as a troubleshooter and there as a troubleshooter, here as a turnaround agent. He resolved conflicts and addressed conflicts and has addressed deep-seated problems.
I believe over the course of his career, he served on over 15, maybe 20 different boards, commissions.
He's encouraged me to be the best I can be. And each time he's been involved with something, he's again tried to make the organization be the best it could be.
When I last talked to David, I thanked him for all he did to make me get where I got. You know what his answer was? You got me where I got. He was being overly generous.
I think that David Flanagan has accomplished more in his lifetime than just about any other person in the history of the state.
David was interested in excellence. Do what you're doing, do it well, do it to the very best of your ability.
And we just need to make sure that the next generation and the ones that follow that there are more David Flanagans out there that rise to the top of the old milk jug.
I think that dedication, fairness, studying the facts, being bipartisan really count, and they move mountains. And David moved mountains.
You know, he has a phenomenal ability, so I think he just viewed it as, this is what you do, this is the good life, the right life.
He wanted to work doing what he loved as long as he could. That says a lot about the man, too.
When you're with somebody like David, you're reminded of what's important in life, and you're reminded to be the best you can be. Those kinds of people, they're rare and they lift you up.
When you have a friend who is really a great person, it helps you be better.
He's more than a colleague, he's a really good friend.
He's a great friend.
There isn't anybody like David.
Not only as a leader or as a CEO or as a lawyer, but as a person.
Anytime I get an opportunity to talk about David Flanagan, it's a privilege and an honor.
I'd like to talk about the man with a life so well lived.
He was very supportive.
And David was always doing about the right thing.
You know, he's the complete package.
David's big picture and quiet hand are with us, and they're going to be with us for a long time.
He was that good. David was the star.
I'd like to be remembered as somebody who got a lot of satisfaction out of life by doing more than just making money. But that was never my highest priority. My highest priority was to succeed at what I was undertaking, and that it was something worth doing. And that had its own rewards. And, you know, I guess that's the way I look at things.